Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's Agency Automators Hangout. I'm Jordan, your co-host, and we have Noah here as well. And on today's Hangout, we have Andrea Volpini from WordLift, and we're going to be chatting about using machine learning to conquer knowledge graphs. So I first learned about Andrea through Twitter, tweeting a lot about artificial intelligence, machine learning. I know he recently was tweeting a lot about BERT, so this is going to be a very, very interesting talk. So, Andrea, mind introducing yourself to the audience?
Sure. I am a co-founder and CEO of WordLift, and we automate SEO, starting with a WordPress plugin. And I've been doing digital marketing for quite some time now, but I'm really focused on bringing together artificial intelligence and search engine optimization.
Awesome. So how did you get started in SEO and in AI? What brought the two together in it?
I'm a long time web guy, let's say. I started with building website back in 1995. I know it sounds like a long time ago.
Wow.
It is a long time ago. So I worked for many years with content management system, and so I had a company to build content management system. And so when when the year 2000 was approaching, we had a lot of content to manage because we were working for the Italian Parliament, because I'm from Italy. And so we started to look at Semantic Web Technologies as a way of improving our existing content manager. And and then I started to do research work on Semantic Web Technologies.
When did you start to think of it as Semantic Web Technologies? What year was that for you?
I think we got the first research grant in Italy on Semantic Web Technology in year 2000.
Wow.
So Tim Berners-Lee had come with this idea of transitioning from pages to data. And we thought this is going to be, a thing, because it's going to solve the problem that we have in handling, millions of users on a site that has, thousands of pages that have to be linked together, but there is a lack of proper structure. But it didn't happen. So it took a long time before this vision of creating a web of data became a reality. And at that point, then I sold my previous company, so the CMS company, and because I wanted to purely focus on creating a product on Semantic Web Technologies. This was in 2011. So I started to do research work with within European projects, and one project was very successful in creating a knowledge stack for a content management system. And so I started to play with this idea of creating an editor, so a tool that could create out of text data. And that was 2011. Then 2013, I started a company in Salzburg in Austria by doing a spin-off of a department of a research institution that was working on knowledge graph and linked data. So I got there because I was working in research. I was coming from the startup background, web background. They were researchers. And so they wanted to create a startup. They say, "Why don't you help us?" And I say, "Yeah, sure." And so I co-founded and created a company that it's called RedLink, and now it's 5 years old. And we do a lot of enterprise work with information extraction and artificial intelligence. But then with my semantic editor, I started to envision a product. And I started to test this product as Schema Markup was coming into the market. So 2011, the search engine got together and decided, okay, we should agree on a vocabulary to describe the web. And I thought, well, that's a commercial opportunity for my editor. And so I went on to my biggest client of that time, and I say, hey, there's going to be something interesting in the search engine world, because search engine have agreed on a common vocabulary, and I have an editor that can boost SEO. This was 2011, so it didn't really happen. So I started to mark up pages back then with the first version of schema.org with my editor. But I was still thinking, I have a semantic editor in my hands. But then, as the year progressed, all of a sudden, the SEO community started to get some real interest in what we were doing. And then I would never thought about SEO, because, I mean, for me, SEO wasn't a thing. I never thought SEO was a thing, because I always have built, website for very large organization. I never focused on marketing and SEO in general. But then, the market kind of told me, hey, this thing is for SEO. I had the idea that it was good, but I didn't thought that it was the thing. And so 2017, to cut it short, we incorporated a company, and we got founded by Vurank, who is a Belgian leading tool for SEO auditing.
Yeah.
And so we got started in this process of creating a product for automating SEO with knowledge graphs and semantic technologies.
Wow, that's
Can I ask
that's
a
one
quick
heck of a
question?
journey.
So in 2011, you were trying to push semantic data onto websites.
Yeah.
How are you envisioning consuming that data if not SEO?
Well, I mean, the vision of the semantic web is broader than SEO. It's about, creating a web of meanings in order to not having, search engine crawling the pages to extract the data, but having the data made available to smart agents. So application that can, traverse this information and provide answer without, crawling the pages. So which is, in a way, it's happening, not the way that we expect it to happen, but it's happening. Of course, I realized when I was doing the pitch to my client that the only angle was SEO.
Right, because I'm sitting here thinking, like, I get we entered the world of I entered the world of structured data in 2015, so I'm definitely late to the game. But I also feel like back then it felt cutting edge. Like none of my competition was using JSON-LD in any of their markup when I started doing it, which doesn't mean I was ahead of the curve, but to hear you thinking about semantic web in 2000 kind of blew my mind. I was like, oh my God, let's use when you were talking about semantic web, I was thinking about, let's not design with HTML tables. Like that's how we all talked about it in 2005, 6, and 7, right? It was like, hey, let's use style sheets. Let's use external style sheets. That felt like it was a piece of semantic web.
There is, I mean, if you work with content management system and you build content management system, you know that then there is a rendering layer, but then there is a content model in the back that kind of makes the thing work. And how could we make this content model available to the outside world? It was through data. So I also went through a phase which was the open data phase. So I started with publishing all the data that we had in the CMS as open data because we were working with government. So it was kind of the thing to do. Right. But then I also was able to launch an open data portal. I think in oh boy, that was probably something like 2015 or 2016 for Forbes, the second largest utility company in Italy. So, and that was the first corporate or multinational organization that was publishing open data, because I was convinced that in order to make marketing, you should market the data and not only the web pages. And that's exactly what's happening now when you're pushing, let's say, all the retail store to Google My Business, or all your products as an XML feed and so on and so forth. So why don't we kind of get to the source, make it available so that others can build apps, and this would kind of market our products and services.
That's amazing.
Wow. Yeah. Very interesting.
So then of course now we call it artificial intelligence, which is a kind of a broad definition that has inside a lot of different components. But back then it was semantic technologies, and it still is, as far as I'm concerned.
Mm-hmm. So let's actually talk about semantic web, knowledge graph, and SEO then. So I think this plays well into our first question. So for those of for those of us who don't know, what exactly is the knowledge graph? What exactly is the semantic web?
Right.
If you can distill it into layman terms.
Right.
Have fun.
So a knowledge graph is it's really a data bank, right? So it's a place where you can bring your content in a way that machine can understand it. So it's a programmatic way to model whatever knowledge domain you are in. So if you are into, let's say, cars, you want to build a knowledge graph that it's capable of making your expertise on cars machine friendly, and in a way it's foundational when you need to start creating whatever AI driven product or service. Mm-hmm. So you need to start from the data that you have in order to model the domain where you have your product or your expertise, in order to allow others to create application on top of it, or of course to allow yourself to create application on top of it. So SEO is one of these applications built on top of a knowledge graph.
Mm-hmm. Because I'm guessing, like in our case, then Google is kind of crawling your own knowledge graph, understanding it, and then using that data to rank your site accordingly.
Right. I mean, yeah. Google has its own knowledge graph, right. And its own knowledge graph it's built of facts. So there are billions of facts inside Google's knowledge graph. But where is this data coming from? Because of course, as a marketer, I want to market my data, and I want to understand what are the sources that the application of today. So one of the sources is, of course, after the acquisition of Freebase was of course this large repository of comments and data sets that was created by MetaWeb. And so Freebase is kind of a Google as its own knowledge graph that then it's also getting information from Wikipedia, and it's getting information from, well, your website as well. So my plan with WordLift is to democratize knowledge graph technologies in order to let everyone create his own knowledge graph. And the reason I want to do this is that until we don't have full control on the data, we cannot really kind of play a role in the business, right? Because if you're holding my data, how can I create a business model on top of it? And so the plan with WordLift was really in the beginning, and this is why I didn't think about SEO, was that I wanted to create a technology to let everyone from a CMS like WordPress create a knowledge graph like the one that Google was building. And I wanted to do this because also I want to express my opinion, and I want you to check it, right? Because fake news were going to happen. Mm-hmm. And if I am structuring my information, then it gets easy for you to validate if what I'm saying is right or wrong. So there is a lot of elements in the importance of creating a knowledge graph, but the most important element was in the end helping Google, improve the service by crawling not only the structured data in the page, but the data behind the structured data.
Interesting.
What do you mean by the data behind the structured data?
Right. What do I mean? Let me share. Can I share my screen with that?
Yes. Let me stop sharing right here. It's all yours.
So basically, I mean, in order to create a knowledge graph from content, if we jump on slide 28, you see that, we can start with something unstructured as text, and then we can apply natural language processing and extract features out of a text. And we do these in different ways, of course, and there is all kind of features that can be extracted from a text. But most of the time, we end up in extracting entity and recognizing entities. So these are concepts that machine can understand. So with these concepts, then we start building a knowledge graph that it's derived from the content that we have on, in our website or CMS or PDFs or whatever textual format you want to use. So if you jump to the slide just below, then we see that this knowledge graph, it's interlinked with other graphs. And that's the beauty of this web of data, that it's, it's kind of the web, but it's made of data points. And so when we build the knowledge graph, we don't build like just a database, but we build a network of data points that are connected one to another. And everyone can express his own point of view while we are all talking about the same thing, which kind of helps if you want to start to verify a statement, if you want to validate a statement, if you want to kind of inference or get new data from these links. And that's a little bit of kind of the stack that we have built, that can be used for many different use cases. You can build your own semantic search engine. You can label of your content. You can classify all the information that you have available. But then we kind of specialized in doing these for SEO. And what does this mean is that we help Google and Bing and other semantic search engines out there to get this data by providing a pointer inside the JSON-LD that we published on the web page that allows the crawler to see the entity that it's referenced within a text. So when a crawler gets on your web page, it will read the JSON-LD, but with our structured link data, he finds a unique URI that points back to a knowledge graph. And so all of a sudden, we started to see that search engine like Google were not only crawling the JSON-LD, but also the link data graph that we had in the back, right? And so we started to think, okay, hey, what can we do to market this data even more? And so if you move to the next slide, so here we see basically how it works, right? So we have a text, and this text is actually transforming to an entity, and there is a unique ID. In this case, this is my unique ID on the Google Knowledge Graph. And out of this, unique ID, I have the entity, and the entity tells, the story about a person that then can be used by Google with, the knowledge card or the answer that Google can provide. But let's move to the next slide. What can we do to help Google, kind of see more things about this entity? So this is the entity about myself on Wikidata. So this is another public knowledge graph that we know Google and Facebook and Bing and a lot of other organizations are using in order to create more data and bring better data within their graphs. So much like in Wikipedia, we can contribute to these graphs, and here we can see a representation of the entity for myself that states that I am the CEO of the organization WorldLift, that I'm born in Italy, and I'm male, and so on and so forth. But the interesting part is that there is an exact match property. There is a property that links back to another entity, and that's the entity on data.wordlift.io, which is the knowledge graph that we create. Boom. So we have, data inside Google Knowledge Graph that it's linked and it's fed also with data from Wikidata, but within Wikidata, then we are able to create links to our own knowledge graph, right? So if you go to the next slide, we see that we have also contributed on a change, a new property in the Wikidata ontology, which is called the word lift ID. And the word lift ID allows us to create backlinks from Wikidata to our knowledge graph. And of course, you can create your own knowledge graph, your own custom domain and everything. Of course, the
quick
tool.
Question.
Yeah.
I got a quick question. So I've been fascinated by the same as definition inside structured data.
Right.
And I've been asking people for a while and I neglected to test it because I'm a dummy. But when you look through the documentation in a number of places, you'll typically see same as for entities linking to like Yelp or Facebook or Twitter. I noticed in your slide deck when I read through it that you used it the way that I had postulated being able to use it, where you could say that your entity is the same as CyberAndy, same as WordLift, same as, etc. Have you tested that? Can you use any property you want to link all the different places where you are on the web as an entity back to you?
Yeah, I mean there are different ways in which these links can be used.
Okay.
So
use that as a dumb question. I've this isn't my
it's pretty essential.
Yeah.
In the SEO that we do.
Yeah.
And there are let's say two layers. So one layer is kind of the loose definition that schema.org provide of a same as link.
Yeah.
The loose definition is that the same as can point to a URL, so a web page.
Right.
And that is super powerful because it allows a search engine to get more triples about that person, about that entity. So the more we can confirm that, this web page is about that entity, the more we provide, support to, getting the data from that page about that entity. And I see this happening, right? So if I can create a lot of, links all together for the same entity and the information across these different web pages is consistent, it would be easy to add or to see new statement getting into, Bing or Google. Now, there is another layer that is the data layer where, definitions are more strict. So you don't want to point, an entity to a web page, but you want to point an entity to another entity, which is, kind of a more strict version of the same as that we see in schema. And so in the ontology of Wikidata, this can be called exact match, or now, you can use the word lift ID if you're publishing data using word lift, or we use in our graph a property from the OWL ontology, which is actually OWL same as. Now, these links are slightly different because you can compute data with this link. Whether if you kind of provide a machine with a link to a web page, the machine still will need to kind of, either get the structured data from this web page or try to understand what the web page says. When I'm dealing with an entity on a graph and I'm connecting this entity with the equivalent entity on another graph, I can make a federated query and I can use the data for that entity on these two graphs to, let's say, validate a statement or to enrich a statement, right? So these are the two layers. One layer, you are connecting an entity with web pages, and on another layer, you're connecting one entity with another entity, and then you can compute the data that comes from these two entities.
Wow.
And you're kind of blowing my mind. I don't know how Jordan feels about it.
Yeah, I'm speechless right now.
So this is not stuff that we talk about with other SEOs all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So which layer have you been able to tease out which layer drives, ranking lifts more if you're connecting via the stricter data version where you're connecting entities with other entities, or is it the connecting entities with web pages?
I think that there are so many different use cases that it's hard to kind of tell you what strings should be pulled. So and it's more complicated than that. I mean,
of course, yeah.
Ranking, it's not impacted by a same as link, unless there are some kind of cases where we are providing the information that allows Google to better understand the query. So let me one of the example that I usually give is a synthetic query. So if you go on the deck, there is a slide about that one down that talks that one up like 37. So if you go on slide 36, or this one, 36. So here you basically see that I'm making a query that is the CEO of where lift. So the query that I'm using as a user is CEO of where lift. And the results that we see on the previous slide, on slide 36, are indeed a combination of the results for CEO of where lift with the results of Andrea Volpini. So this is a case where the search engine is creating a synthetic query. So the search engine is, given the query of the user, is creating a query that it thinks it can be beneficial for creating a better result page. So rather than just displaying everything about the CEO of where lift, it also adds pages from the query Andrea Volpini. And this is happening because there is an entity behind that, and there is a relationship between the entity Andrea Volpini and the entity WordLift in Google's knowledge graph and in Wikidata and in every WordLift created knowledge graph that confirms that Andrea Volpini is the CEO of WordLift. So in the patent that I discovered because of Lasky, we could see that structured data is actually used or can be used for creating these synthetic queries, much like in this case. So a user looks for Andrea Volpini or for CEO of WordLift, and Google is capable of interpreting this query and getting the results also about Andrea Volpini, creating a better experience for the end user, but also helping us be found, right?
Okay, so I have seen synthetic query spelled a couple different ways. Is this the proper way to spell it in the main part on the left side of the slide? I thought I had seen it synthetic, like a fake query.
No,
synthetic is correct, right?
No, synthetic is correct. It means that it's a machine generated.
Yep.
It's part of this query augmentation process that Google now has that allows Google to understand the query and to get results better than using the query that the user has created.
Can you feed synthetic queries to your knowledge graph?
Well, I mean, potentially we if we have to use the knowledge graph for creating a semantic search engine, that's what we would do. So we would kind of expand the entities by kind of taking a loop and look at the entities around in order to create more synonyms for that entity, which is in this case what it's happening. So yeah, potentially yes. I mean, it's not what we do because we're not building with WordLift a semantic search engine yet, but we just created
yet. Can you show us how your tool works? Is that okay, Jordan, that we jump in?
Yeah, of course.
It would be beautiful if I could share the screen.
Is there anywhere on the deck that shows it off?
And if not, maybe we can log into a site or something like that. You can help us log into something and we can check it out.
Let me see if we can do it this way. So let me just give you a quick overview of the way that WordLib works. So here we are inside WordPress. We do have also JavaScript library that it's working, basically on top of every CMS, but that's the WordPress plugin, and probably it's simpler to see. So I have a text, and with the NLP I'm detecting entities over here, and for each one of these entities, I have some information that WordLib that's either pulled from the user vocabulary or from Wikidata, and I can use these images in order to make my content richer. I can also decide that I want to, for instance, so I can move the images into the editor, but I can also decide to create links or just use the entity for annotating the content. So it's like a tagging system, really. But behind these labels, there are not tags, but there are real world entities that are interlinked with other entities in the Google Knowledge Graph and other publicly available data sets. So when I do this, and I'm going to simply publish my article, I've done already a lot for my SEO, because I have kind of disambiguated my text and created a lot of structured linked data. So we can have a look at it using the Google Structured Data Testing tool. And here we'll see the data that WordLib automatically creates after the user has enriched the article with the entities.
So it's generating the data before the DOM is executed, right?
Right. I mean, well, this one, it depends on the way that we do it, but usually we tend to create the JSON-LD asynchronously, so it doesn't affect the payload of the page.
Okay.
But on some large websites, then everything is cached, so we do it synchronously. So there are different ways of doing it, but we want to make sure, of course, that all this data doesn't kind of slow down the rendering of the page. Now, here you see already that there is a major difference compared to the structured data that we usually see, is that we have a unique ID, which is actually a URI. So this is a unique identifier in the web of data. And if I go there with a machine, I can get an RDF representation of this article. But so the crawler can jump here, and it can read, the JSON-LD that WordLib has created, but it can also jump, behind every entity and get more data about it. So it's like if we would provide kind of a sitemap of the meanings of the site within the linked data infrastructure. So the structured data is also, WordLib is also telling, that, the main entity, the about property is, Tulsi Gabbard, the politician, blah, blah, blah. And then it's also, kind of using these attributes, which is called mentions, that says, hey, this is also mentioning, United States Custom Unit and George W. Bush. And you can see that all this data, not only as, of course, the description of it, the unique ID that points back to the knowledge graph that we are creating, but it also has all the links that, with the same as, that not only go to the web pages, because we could also create the links to, a web page, but it also has links to data sets. So you can see that here, WordLib automatically has interlinked the entity against the equivalent entity on DBpedia and Freebase and Yago. And so we have a different data sets that we can configure in order to improve the automatic interlinking. And there is a lot of these. But
can you show us one of those? Can you show us the
yeah,
mine. Okay.
So that's the unique ID when seen from the browser. So this is there is something happening in the back end of this triple store that it's called content negotiation. So I get to the browser and I get an HTML, but really as a machine, I would get, RDF or Turtle or Entry or JSON-LD, much like I do in Wikidata or DBpedia. So it's a data set.
Can we see it in JSON-LD just because I'm super familiar with that structure?
Yep, sure. So this is something that, let's see if I can get it linked this way. So that's a little bit of the representation of the entity in the JSON-LD from the graph, which is of course, this is just related to the Democratic Party. But this is on the graph. But then, we saw that if I go here, the Democratic Party, I have pretty much the same property, but not necessarily the same, right? So we can play with these two levels. One is on-site and the other one is off-site. And so if I go and see the Democratic Party is over here, and I have this information which is encapsulated within the web page itself, but it's also available as linked data within offsite on our triple store. So we have a lot of flexibility.
How do you determine whether the entity should be referenced inside or offsite then?
No, the entity is always referenced on the knowledge graph, and the JSON-LD always points to the knowledge graph.
Okay.
So here you could have an ID which is just non-existent, but in our case the ID it's actually a linked data resource. So here you could create whatever string, but rather than doing that, we use it as linked data because JSON linked data uses the same linked data infrastructure. So we provide a pointer back to the graph, and then in the graph we can have the same or different information depending on the way that we configure things out.
You're blowing both of our minds. So have you seen any large-scale e-commerce websites successfully utilize this technology? And have you seen them crushing the competition because of it?
I'm not too familiar personally with e-commerce because we do a lot of work in the news and media sector.
That's what I was gathering. That's what I thought. Okay.
And the travel sector. We still have to kind of start working more on scale with e-commerce. We have a couple of projects that we are working on. One is particularly interesting. We're working on a framework for building e-commerce website, and they are kind of integrating WordLift within their stack, but it's still kind of under development. So I cannot give you much information about results in that specific area, but of course we have pretty impressive results on news and media and travel.
So do you consume, like, I'm seeing all of these unique IDs are reference your knowledge graph. So how are you consuming all the open data that you can get in order to build yours? Or is it sort of building it on the fly? Like, I don't understand how. Can you take us through that a little bit?
Yeah, when we create an article, I am detecting an entity like Washington.
Yeah.
I can create, and in this case, for instance, is not the right Washington, so the disambiguation is not properly working here. Right. So I would need to change these and point it to the place. Yeah. But when I select the entity and I go and save, then these automatically is going to create the entity into the knowledge graph. So look here, I am getting it wrong because the New York Times is actually so the NLP is not properly finding. But so I'm going to go like this. Yeah. And then I want to create this entity, and then I'm going to ask WordLift to think it again. And then it's gonna, give me the list, and then I say, yeah, I want to talk about the paper, and then the entity has been created. So the article now is annotated as an article reference to the knowledge graph, but the entity is also within the knowledge graph encapsulated.
So how do you create entities from scratch then?
Like this, I've just created now the entity for the New York Times. But I can also create an entity for something that doesn't exist, right? So I don't know, like this one.
Yeah.
I can create it, and I will look first on the different data sets that we have in order to see if if there is something already, and if there isn't, I'm just gonna create it from scratch.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm gonna say, okay, this is probably a person, so it's a who, and then it's a, this is the entity type, and then I'm gonna say, yada yada yada, whatever. And I'm just gonna create these, and now, I'm bringing these into the linked data cloud.
Wow. So then that's saved to the word lift,
Yeah,
knowledge graph, and
that's
then when
correct.
this article is published, the
Yeah.
JSON-LD will have the entity that you just created with a reference
That's
in the
correct.
knowledge graph.
Then as a user, I can come back on the vocabulary where I find all the entities, and I can, kind of get back to the entities that I've created and curate them. Then I can decide I want to index these or I don't want to index these. But let's move to kind of a real world use case, because of course it gets a lot simpler to see a website that it's using WordLift rather than our test site. So let's go on the nextweb.com. So we have articles here. This is a large site. So let me get an article that has been annotated already, because that's fairly new. So so I'm just opening a site. So what you see here are not tags, though they look like tags, but they are actually entities. So that WordLift has created for structuring the content within this section. So this is an entity page, which looks pretty much like a tag page, but it has its own equivalent data point in the data.nextweb.com. And if we go and look at the JSON-LD with our sniffer.
What was that in? What was Open Link Structured Data Sniffer? There's a tool to share.
Yeah, that's a great tool that allows you to look at the data behind the page. And sorry, but I have that.
Data Sniffer.
Yeah. So you see that here, this is not just a page, but it's an entity, and that's the unique URI for that entity within the knowledge graph of the next web.
So this is amazing. So let's say someone doesn't have WordLift, and they wanted to take. What are the takeaways that someone who's not on the WordPress platform, like how could someone get started using this technology? How long would it take to build the stack?
So the stack is not easy to build, but it's all open. It's all open, meaning that it's all infrastructure that it follows the W3C recommendation for creating a linked data platform and an RDF-based knowledge graph, and of course it uses a content analysis API that can process content and do name entity recognition, name entity disambiguation, and of course a lot of other features that can be built. We now have this JavaScript library that allows websites to get WordLift, and so we can plug the JavaScript on, and then with the JavaScript we create the JSON-LD, and then we can create the entities much like we do for WordPress. But let me show you a little bit of why we want to use entities in the first place, because of course, so we saw that, okay, we can, of course, annotate the article, create the JSON-LD, get the images, create these kind of content hubs. So these, entity pages acting as content hubs, but I can also start, providing also widgets that allows you to find out more about this site. So I can, leverage on the graph and create, navigational widget that helps the user stay longer on the page.
Ooh.
So.
Oh, so it'll build a word. Okay.
So. So here you see that I have added a widget on the page that WordLift has created by looking at the relationship between the concept within my graph.
Yeah.
Wow. And this is all of the entities that are found in this article then?
That's correct. But so there is a lot of these use cases and widget that we can play with, that all of what they do is, helping the user understand the context of the page. Mm-hmm. So that's an article. So these are another widget where we have, the list of entities that are related to the article. But for instance, here I go to long form articles, and then we create like these card that helps the user understand what do we mean by long form articles.
Wow. And then that's pulled from the WordLift knowledge graph that you're...
Right. So, and then I might also have the page that brings me, to the definition of it. And then, I can start, linking and moving from one concept to another using widgets, right?
Jeez.
Jordan, you look like someone just punched you in the kidneys.
I feel so overwhelmed in the best way possible right now.
I can stop, huh? We can it be silent.
So if someone was to do the JavaScript implementation rather than the WordLift plugin, because they're not on WordPress,
yep.
Would they be able to pull in these different content types? Or is that just with the plugin?
We're bringing these widgets here that you see, which is the content recommendation. We're bringing these into the cloud version, and but we don't have yet these other tools. But these are also easy to build because they are built on the JSON-LD. So the cloud will bring the JSON-LD, and then these can be done on the front end. So of course there is it's very easy to install the WordLift cloud, but we're still working on all the navigation components. But let me give you another use case of why you need to create your graph and why it helps SEO. Because you see now that I am connecting articles in a kind of an effective way, and so user stays longer usually when we add WordLift into the picture. We have this navigational widget that kind of extend the session time and the pages per session and so on and so forth. But also we now have data that we can use for understanding more the behavior on our site. But if we are a publisher, we can also sell better the advertising. So this is the data studio template that we have created using the data in the graph. So here we see the traffic from Google Analytics, not in terms of pages, but in terms of entity. So I can see, for instance, for a concept like linked data, how many articles we have on the website, and what traffic it's generating this concept. So here I can see that I have 32 articles. Traffic is going well, but that's the overall pattern, and then maybe I can have a look at machine learning and see, okay, how is traffic going? So I'm not looking at pages, but I'm looking at the concept within the pages, and so I can kind of get a different understanding of my content. I can also use these entities in order to understand, for instance, the user behind these concepts. So here we'll see a different, well, I can see that, for instance, for structured data, traffic, it's coming, Let's see if it loads the
So
data.
I think of your entity titles as topics, like just big
Yep.
topics, and
Yep,
then
that's correct.
okay.
That's correct.
So is this data being fed into GA then through like JS events or something?
Right. So we get the data from the page into Google Analytics, and then here we're just creating a dashboard that gets the data from Google Analytics and allow us to kind of understand and get the. So you see that out of that concept, 73% of the traffic is for organic, but maybe I'm sure that on linked data I'm better because there's less competition. So, or maybe not, but we can see that. So I can see, what concept I'm better.
Yeah.
I'm slightly better at least.
Huh.
And
so let's pretend you're a content marketer for a second.
Yeah.
How would you use this report to drive performance? How do you, because you clearly use this as a tool.
Yeah. So one simple way that I do is that we can look at the concept where we are better in order to understand if we need more content or if we need to kind of revamp the existing content to keep on improving. And I might remove content that it's not relevant for my audience because I see that it's not performing well. In other cases, for instance, in travel sector, I can see that some events are male focused and some events are female focused. And so I can kind of distill this information to the editorial team to say, hey, you're talking about a person within this age that it's, interesting in, let's say, dining or technology. And that's different from, for instance, the person that you can reach when you talk about a Google Knowledge Graph. Now, it doesn't make much sense on our side because it's kind of too narrow, but if you think it on a broader side, it makes a lot of sense. The other way is that as a publisher, I can go to the brand and I can say, hey, I have this amount of traffic for you, much like Facebook or Google do when they sell us the topics, right? So you can see that the breakdown here is slightly different. So this is another use case, is that I can use these in order to go to the advertisers and say, hey, I have these concepts and I have these patterns of traffic. Do you want to do something with me? So that's the other way.
Got it.
So yes, we've seen a lot. I mean, and I hope you like it.
By presenting structured content for every piece of content on a website, it helps Google understand all the entities on that website. And because it understands all the entities, it understands how to present it better as answers to search queries. Is that the bottom line? That's the high level, right?
That's one of the use cases. The other use cases is that I'm gonna keep the user longer, possibly longer on the site by providing contextual information.
Right.
So by preventing the user from jumping off the site in order to understand who is this guy and what they're talking about and so on and so forth.
And tons of interlinking too, right? I mean,
right. And then of course the other thing is that I can create my vocabulary, but then I can also ask WordLift to automatically create all the links on the archive. And so I can create, programmatically a lot of backlinks to these entity pages and create, a convergence on pages that talks about a specific topic like Libra. Yeah.
So how everybody's talking about BERT right now, it seems like in forums, and when I talk to SEOs, they ask me questions about it. How has Google's new announcement changed anything in how you're working or how you're thinking about your tool?
So let me give you a practical example here.
Cool.
So this is just a test that I'm about to publish. I haven't published yet, but hopefully we'll go live on either our blog or maybe, you know, some SEO outlet that it's interesting in having a look at it. But here, so this is a Google Collab notebook, and I'm using BERT for creating meta description from the WorldLift.io website.
Cool.
This is a very basic use case. I've been working on it for quite some times in the area of automatic text summarization, not on these implementations specifically. This is really a demo, but so we're starting here and we're loading a bunch of libraries that are used by this notebook. Particularly, we are going to use the transformers. This is a very powerful library that allows practitioners to use these new fancy language models like BERT. But there is a lot of, you know, more things that can be done with the transformers. And we're going to use also Spacey, which is an NLP open source library that I also used a lot. And then once everything is loaded into the Google Cloud, we can start rolling our script. Here we're going to get data from a crawl that I made of the website. So I have crawled the website using WooRank because WorldLift is partnered with WooRank. And so I have put the crawl data, the CSV on Google Docs so I can play with it. And now I'm gonna create a data set using the crawl data. And you can see here that, you know, there is, you know, all the different files that have been crawled. And you can immediately see that, you know, some of these files, you know, don't deserve to be processed. You know, there is the robot.txt, of course. In the crawl, I mean, I get all the URLs that have been crawling. So here I'm gonna kind of play the SEO. So automate the process of SEO by saying, hey, give me everything that is a page because I don't need to create meta description for images or for the robot.txt file. Give me everything where the meta description is absent, so there's no meta description. Give me all the URL from my blog that have a position that it's, you know, less than 15.
And are you pulling that data from WooRank or from GSC, Google Search Console?
I'm using WooRank for creating a CSV of the crawl. So WooRank crawls the website, generates me a CSV. I upload the CSV on the Google Docs, and then I'm running the script.
WooRank is getting position data through Search Console API?
Yeah, also.
Okay.
Exactly.
Okay.
So that's the data from the Google Search Console.
Got it.
So it's very nice and easy. I mean, I have the same script with of course Screaming Frog or, you know, whatever crawler you want to use, you can use it. So we have 25 URLs that kind of match these parameters after, you know, filtering everything that is not a page, that, you know, has a decent position and so on and so forth. And I'm just gonna, you know, run a very simple function here that will crawl the site, right? And we'll get the text out of the web page. And here is where the magic happened, because I'm going to invoke BERT in order to create a summary. And I'm using a very, you know, simple way here. I'm testing, of course, a lot of different parameters. There is a lot of testing going on these days on these.
Yeah.
Because I want to generate, you know, a nice description of the pages that I can potentially use for improving, for instance, the context card that I show you here.
Sure.
So I want to use BERT for, rather than, you know, getting the first lines from the web page, I want to create a summary that fits with this card. Okay. And so now it's running.
This looks like expensive processing. Like we're still on one page, right?
Yeah, it's starting. I mean, it's expensive, and it's a very important point that you highlighted.
Yeah.
Because I don't think that it's only expensive, it's also, might become unsustainable from the environmental point of view.
Yeah.
because if I have to do it on large sites, I might consume a lot of resources. But start from the point that, in the beginning, I say I'm just going to process on the crucial URL. I'm just going to work on my blog English version and the pages that don't have a meta description that, maybe have a good position or whatever. It's going to run. It's going to take some time, and it's going to kind of speed up as things get into memory. So the first one is on, and now it's gonna continue and build the other. I think we have 25 in this example to build from. So it will take a few minutes before generating the results. But you can see that the results are quite good. So according to Wikipedia, fact-checking is the act of checking factual assertion in non-fictional text in order to determine the veracity and correctness of factual statement in the text. And it's probably too long to be, a good meta description, but it's the quality of it's quite surprising. Now, this is extractive summarization, so I'm not creating new text. I'm reusing the text in the article. So Bert is using the existing text that I have in my article. So look at the HTML for the entity about HTML. HTML is the main markup language for creating web pages and other information that can display in the browser. Wow, super. This is good, ready to go. Of course, if I would use GPU power or even TPU, I could use an abstract model. So I could generate new sentences rather than using the sentences that I have on the page. But this would be even more resource consuming, and so I don't want to apply here, but we could do that also.
So how do we make this sustainable?
Well, first of all, we have to do decision like I'm not going to use abstractive summarization for this context.
Yeah,
I'm going to use extractive because it's going to be less resource consuming.
I'm just trying to imagine a website like the New York Times trying to use this, and I'm sure they are, but I got to think.
The other thing is that you have to focus on what really matters. You know?
Yep.
So you have to focus on things that make the site different today. So you're not going to process everything that it's not from the last. Now you can see pretty much the time it takes. So it cannot be really done in real time, but it can be done in near real time, which means that as the user preloads the page, you might trigger these and then cache the results and prevent these from happening again.
Right.
So there is a lot of engineering that needs to take place in order for these to kind of scale and use in real world environment. But so you have to take decision about what type of usage of the model you want to make, and you have to be cost effective and efficient. And then you have to really decide where you want to apply this technology, because you cannot do it everywhere, because it's just going to be pointless and consume a lot of resources. And then you have to do a lot of engineering.
So can we ask you about your personal tech stack or your skill set? It sounds like you are deep in JavaScript, Python, HTML, CSS, probably PHP. What else?
I don't do code. I gave up writing code for production system a long time ago.
Yeah.
And my close friend, best friend, and CTO, it's doing the heavy lifting, where I'm just left playing with things around and understanding how things could work. So I can experiment with a lot of technologies. I have ideas, but I don't commit code that will go in production. So this one now, I'm playing with these, and I'm seeing the potential of it. I might create the model at the end, but then this is going to be engineered by a proper development team.
Right.
Mm-hmm. But I mean, my background is that I dropped out of school and I started to build website in 95. So I mean, you can imagine.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And I took my first coding class in 98 or 9. And it was literally a class that taught us how to link 3 pages together, insert images and paragraphs in H1 tags.
So you got enough experience, just like I have. So that's pretty much the background. So we've done these. Now we're just gonna we can store the data, and we can see the results nice and clean, and then I can just save the file and then import it into the CMS or clean it, revise it. There is also an important aspect here that we don't expect an algorithm like this to be 100% reliable. So we want to always kind of look at it.
For sure. Very cool.
Wow.
So we've hit that hour mark, if not past it, Andrea. And we do want to be respectful of your time.
Yep, that's good.
So one last question. One last question. How can people get in touch with you?
LinkedIn, Twitter. I'm really always open. Conferences. I'm not doing too many this year, because I want to stay focused on the product. We really need to put a lot of effort in bringing this technology outside of WordPress in the most simple possible way. Of course, a lot of the work goes into kind of large scale enterprise projects that we are now starting to follow. But I'm always happy to meet new people and understand also new approaches. There is so much going on, and what I see and this will be my closing statement, is that right now for me, deep learning, machine learning, knowledge graphs, and AI in general is as interesting and as exciting as the web was back in 1995 when I started. Wow. So it's like that we are building a plane while flying it, and there is so much going on, and there is so many things changing that I am back 20 years ago, excited as I was, and of course I'm older, but the feeling that I have, it's exactly the same. There's something new happening. People don't understand it, much like they didn't understand the web back in '95, and we have to jump on. We don't know what it's heading. We know that it's powerful. We know that we must have a lot of ethical concern, because we also made a lot of mistakes with the web as a whole, and we saw it, privacy breaches and data ownership. So these are kind of, also founding principle for the work that I've done, and I want to keep on doing with WordLift, is that, we want to make sure that we get this right. So we don't want to, kind of burn the planet because we want to write meta description to entice more clicks, right? Yeah. So we have to think about it. So we have to be smart, be sustainable, but also we need to, kind of understand something that it's clearly not yet defined.
That was amazing. This was one of this presentation or hangout blew my mind the most of any of the ones that we've had. There's a lot in here for people, and I know they're going to be really excited about it when they watch it.
That's good. That's good. When it's going to go live?
Within a week.
Okay.
It depends on how long the transcription takes. I mean, that's usually the biggest blocker.
Sorry about it.
No, it's great. I've got a ton to learn. If after the fact there's any links or decks that you want to share, can you email those to Jordan so that we can include them as links inside the presentation? Okay. That'd be amazing.
Okay, awesome.
So everybody, we really appreciate you joining us today, and we're looking forward to our next episode, which is coming up in another 2 weeks or so. Between now and then, keep automating, keep it up. We love it, and look forward to hearing your successes. Thanks so much, everybody.
Thanks, Andrea. Noah, take care, everyone.